At the very edge of a quiet town, where the pavement turned to gravel and the pine trees stood like silent watchers, there sat an old, weathered shelter. A kind of place most people didn't notice unless they needed to. The morning was hushed, filled with that strange kind of silence that doesn't feel peaceful. It feels expectant, like the world is waiting for something to happen. Emma stood just outside the shelter doors, her hand tightly gripping the sleeve of her mother's coat. She was 11, but something about the way she held herself made her seem much smaller. The oversized hoodie swallowed her thin frame, and her dark eyes peeked out like a shadow behind the fabric. She didn't say anything. She rarely did now. Months had passed since the police came and took her stepfather away. Months since the bruises had faded from her arms and legs, but the fear still clung to her skin like it had sunk in too deep to ever wash away. She still woke at night, breath caught in her throat, expecting heavy footsteps outside her door. She still flinched when someone closed a door too fast. Her mother, Mara, had tried so hard to reach her. Therapy sessions, gentle reassurances, a new house in a different part of town. But nothing broke through the wall Emma had built to keep the world out. Then someone. Mara knew an old friend from work had suggested something different. Something strange, maybe. Sometimes animals understand what people don't, she had said gently. Mara had hesitated at first, but at this point, she would try anything if it meant Emma could smile again without pretending. As they stepped inside the shelter, they were greeted by a sudden wave of sound barking, tails thumping, the clatter of paws against metal. The smell of straw and dog shampoo filled the air. Volunteers moved between kennels, smiling brightly as they opened cages and let dogs out to greet potential adopters. Emma stayed close to Mara's side. A wiry little terrier trotted up and licked Emma's hand. She smiled just a little, but it didn't reach her eyes. Her attention drifted past the cheerful chaos, down the row of kennels, to the very end where shadows pooled. There, behind the last steel cage, half lost in the dim light, sat something still. A pair of amber eyes watched from the dark. The dog didn't bark. He didn't wag his tail. He didn't even move. He simply stared. His massive frame was hunched and coiled like a drawn bow. Emma froze. Her fingers clenched tighter around her sleeve, her eyes locked on those glowing eyes in the dark. "Mom," she whispered, her voice shaking but certain. "I want to see that one." The volunteer who had been walking with them, a young woman with a sunny voice and easy smile, stopped. Suddenly, her expression changed the moment she realized where Emma was pointing. Her posture went rigid. Her smile vanished like someone had flipped a switch. The change was subtle, but unmistakable. It wasn't fear in the dramatic sense. It was the deep, quiet kind. The kind that people carry when they've seen something that never fully leaves them. She hesitated, then said in a low, careful voice, "That's Ranger." She glanced at Mara, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Don't stand too close." She didn't shout. There was no panic in her tone, but the weight of her words made Mara's chest tighten. That kind of calm warning always came from experience, real, dangerous experience. Behind the bars, Ranger's amber eyes glowed with something ancient. He still hadn't moved, but it felt like the entire shelter aisle belonged to him, like everyone else was just passing through his territory. Thick red letters were painted on the cage door. Extreme caution. Do not approach. The intake sheet was taped crookedly to the bars, with the word aggressive underlined 3 separate times. A different volunteer, older and clearly nervous, cleared her throat. "He's been here the longest. We found him on the edge of town, tied to a post. The rope around his neck was so frayed it had nearly dug into his skin. He'd been beaten, maybe for years. He doesn't eat if anyone's near. He's bitten through protective gloves twice. He's just gone too far. Gone too far." Those words echoed like a cold wind through the room, but Emma didn't back away. She didn't flinch. While everyone else saw a threat crouched in a cage, Emma saw something else entirely. It wasn't Ranger's size or his scars or his growl that held her. It was his silence. The kind of silence that comes from being hurt for so long you forget how to speak without fear. She recognized it. She knew that silence. It was the same silence she carried in her chest every day. The way he didn't move, that wasn't aggression. That was self-protection. The way his eyes followed her hands, that wasn't hunting, it was survival. In Ranger, Emma didn't see a dangerous dog. She saw the same girl who used to press her back against her bedroom wall when footsteps echoed in the hallway. The girl who never spoke too loudly. The girl who shrank into corners just to avoid being noticed. The growl that rumbled from Ranger's chest should have sent her running. It should have reminded her of every warning she'd ever heard. But instead of retreating, Emma stood straighter. Her hands still trembled, but she didn't hide them. She took one small step forward. Not two. Be brave. But because she understood, her voice, when it came, was soft, almost lost under the sound of the growl. "It's okay," she whispered. "I know what it's like to hurt." Something flickered in Ranger's eyes, like a light fighting through the dark. His ears twitched backward briefly before perking up again. The deep growl rumbled in his chest, but it wavered now, unsure, not as fierce. Emma stepped forward again, slow and steady, like someone walking through a storm without flinching. She got so close she could feel the heat of his breath through the metal bars. Her heart thundered against her chest like it was trying to escape, but when she spoke, her voice was calm. "I know what it feels like to be scared every day," she said gently. "To feel like you're stuck, like you can't trust anyone around you." Her words floated in the quiet air like fragile pieces of glass. And for the first time since she had come into the room, Ranger didn't look like he was ready to lunge. His strong shoulders moved slightly. His growl cracked and faded into a soft, painful whine. Emma swallowed the lump in her throat. Her next words were barely above a whisper, spoken more to herself than to him. "You don't have to go through this pain by yourself anymore." The world seemed to stop. For a brief, precious moment, even the usual chaos of the shelter faded away. The barking quieted as if every dog, every soul inside that building sensed something important was unfolding. Ranger didn't move right away. His head hung just above the concrete floor, muscles tight like he couldn't decide whether to protect himself or let go. But his eyes had changed. The frantic, wild shine in them was replaced by something deeper, something sad, something human. Emma slowly lowered herself to her knees, letting them press against the cold floor. She made her body smaller, non-threatening. Her voice was soft, a thin line of hope. "It's okay," she whispered. "You don't have to pretend to be strong anymore." Ranger didn't growl. He didn't flinch. His golden eyes stayed locked on her every move, but there was no violence, no warning. Instead, his heavy head dipped just a little until his chin touched the floor. The tension in his chest loosened. His breathing came out ragged and slow. Behind Emma, Mara lifted a hand to her face, tears welling up in her eyes. A volunteer nearby dabbed their eyes silently, not daring to look away. Emma leaned forward just a little more, her palms resting gently on the floor in front of her. "You're not a monster," she said in a trembling breath. "You're just hurting. Like me." Ranger's body shifted again like a quiet ripple of emotion washing through him. His ears flattened, and with a soft, almost exhausted breath, he lowered his whole body until his chest met the ground. For the first time since arriving at the shelter, Ranger was no longer guarding himself from the world. He was simply there, listening, breathing, alive. And in that hushed stillness, something passed between them, not just a moment, but a shared understanding. This wasn't just a girl meeting a dog. This was one broken soul finding another, Emma's knees touched the cool floor again as she crept forward just slightly, her hands steady and still. She didn't rush. She didn't reach out. She simply let herself be seen, not as a stranger, not as another person who might hurt him, but as a quiet presence, a girl who understood the dark. "I'm Emma," she said softly, her voice barely holding together. Ranger's ears flicked at the sound. The growl was gone now, replaced by slow, deliberate breaths. The shelter seemed to melt away around them. There was only Emma and Ranger. Emma raised her hand ever so gently and placed her fingers against the cold steel. She didn't push through. She waited, letting him decide. His eyes moved from her face to her fingers. His nose twitched. Just the tiniest motion. A silent question. Emma blinked hard, then said, "I won't hurt you. I know what it's like to be hurt." Ranger's body stayed low, but not because he was afraid anymore. There was a different tension now, one made of hope, not fear. He crept forward, inch by inch, reaching across the quiet space between them. That was enough. Emma turned her hand and opened her palm. Slowly, gently, she slid it through the bars. Ranger paused, one final heartbeat of hesitation. Then he moved, pressing his muzzle into her hand. A deep, shuddering sigh came from him, one that sounded like release, like someone finally exhaling. After carrying the weight of the world in that tiny sliver of space between them, something beautiful began. Trust. Real and fragile and true. Emma didn't move her hand. She let him lean into her, feeling the coarse fur and the raised, healed over scars beneath. Her throat tightened. Those wounds were more than skin deep. They were part of how he survived. She curled her fingers, not grabbing, just holding. "You're not a bad dog," she said, her voice shaking but sure. Ranger made a sound, part whine, part sigh, as if he was answering her in silence, saying, "I know." Behind them, Mara's legs gave out and she sank to the floor, her tears finally falling. She had tried everything to reach her daughter. But now, watching this quiet moment, she saw something she thought was lost, her Emma, beginning to come back. Emma leaned even closer, her forehead almost touching the metal. She didn't care about the smell or the noise or who might be watching. For once, she didn't feel invisible. "You waited for someone to love you," she said, her voice breaking. "I did too." Ranger shifted again, pressing the full weight of his head into her hand. His shoulders sagged, and Emma felt something loosen in her chest, too. Like something cracked open, something that had been closed for years. They had both just been surviving for so long. And in that small moment, they started to heal. The shelter remained still when Mara signed the adoption papers. No warnings, no second guesses. Everyone had seen what happened at Ranger's kennel. No one questioned it. When Mara returned the pen, her hands were shaking, not with worry, but with relief. She turned to see Emma kneeling beside Ranger's open cage. His massive head rested against her chest like it belonged there. "Are you sure?" one volunteer whispered, still stunned. Mara smiled through her tears. "He's already hers." Ranger walked out of the shelter that day, his great frame pressed close to Emma. No one saw a threat anymore. No one whispered the word dangerous. All they saw was a survivor who had finally found his person. Weeks later, under the warm light of a late afternoon, the neighborhood paused to take in the quiet miracle. A thin girl with watchful eyes walked down the sidewalk, one hand resting gently on the thick fur of a German shepherd. He walked so close, his shoulder brushed hers with every step. His head stayed low, matching her pace, as if silently promising, "I've got you now." People stepped out of houses. Some smiled. Some wiped their eyes. They didn't need the full story to understand. Emma looked down at Ranger, and for the first time in years, her face broke into a smile. One that was whole, soft, and real. It wasn't just happiness. It was a new beginning, He had waited for someone to love him. She had waited to feel safe again. And together, they weren't just a girl and a dog. They were survivors who had found each other in the dark. Sometimes the most broken hearts are the ones that teach us what healing really means. And that day, as the girl and the scarred shepherd disappeared down the quiet street, the last rays of sunlight followed them. To everyone who watched, it felt less like a walk home and more like two souls finally finding their way out of the dark. Asterisk.